Hi guys, this is a really intense video. I'll say right off the bat. It's a level up video, and we're going to create a dynamic graph based on our data, which is really difficult to do in older versions of Excel. Some features in newer versions, like the dynamic array functions, make it easy, but we're going to go old school in the old version here. And the concept is that we want to pick a metric from our table that we have here, which has a bunch of stuff in it. And we want to display that metric for all the athletes. So we want to be able to compare athletes in a graph. And it's one thing that's really cool is we can just select all the data we want here. For example, everything in the overall score, and go to Insert, Chart, and we'll get a chart. These are all the overall scores. And if I click on defenseman, for example, or well, maybe I'll let me right click, format chart area, properties, do not move or size with cells. What happened there is I filtered and the chart moved. So I'll just look at defenseman. Now my chart will change to just look at the overall score for defenseman because our chart is based on a table. And that's really cool. But to look at charts for all these metrics, we'd have to create a bunch of different charts. There's no way for us to change the data that we're looking at to a different column. So what I'm going to go through is how to create a chart from a table. Essentially, we're not actually creating it from the table, but I'm going to create a chart where we can do what we just did with the table, where we filter stuff in the table and the chart changes, and then we can also select the metric. And like I said, it's relatively complicated, and I actually had to look up a formula that I didn't know how. I really don't even know how it works, but just to get the names to transfer over. In the newer versions of Excel, there's a formula called unique where you could just apply that to this table and it would automatically pull down a unique list of names, but that doesn't exist here, and index match doesn't work here either because there's nothing to match the names to. So we just essentially want this list of names, and the way that we do that is I'm going to go to my graph data, and you haven't seen this yet if you've been in these videos. I just provided a couple of other chart options for you here to look at, and you can copy them and save them as templates or use them. But we're going to do that over here. We're going to create that graph over here, and this is the formula. Equals if error index, and what we're looking at in our team dashboard is E16 to E65, which is our list of names, and we're matching to a count of names if they're not blank, and offsetting by rows. And what this does essentially is if we drag this down, well, I actually thought so what this does essentially is, well, I just need to change this here to be instead of S44, make it A44 and A44. It might be 43 if I'm here. Now, if I drag this down, it should work. There are all of our names. And notice all the names in here. Let me go back to my team dashboard. If I choose a specific position, now there are only this many names, which if we see there are 17, and if I go back to my graph data, now only these names show up, and then there are still formulas with blanks and stuff in them. But now we have at least a unique list of names from our table, and that's important so that we can tie data into these names and then use that data for our graph. And to pull that data in, we're going to use something called index match. Or it's actually two formulae, index and match, and we've done this before. So I'm going to, well, not in this video, but I'm going to do equals index, open bracket. Now it's asking, this is the first argument here before the comma is pretty much what do we want? Well, we're going to use this table, not our main database table. We're going to use this table that is filtered and stuff. And actually I need to exit out of here for a second so that I unfilter it. It's just easier that way. So I'm going to go equals index. Now what do I want here? I don't know. So I'm just going to type in the table name, which again, I'm going to exit out of here. So I'm going to go to my table design. Right now my table name is table 4. I should probably name this. I'm going to do TBL underscore team dash. And I'm going to go back here. I'm going to do equals index TBL underscore team dash. It kind of pops up for me. So I'm looking for something in that table, comma. And now it's asking me for a row number and a column number. So what index pretty much does is it says, so if I say row 1, column 1, it'll give me whatever the contents are in row 1, column 1 of that table. But I don't want concrete rows and columns. I want to match on criteria so that it automatically gets the information that I'm looking for. Right now I'm looking for something for Peter Pan. That's a row. So for row number, I'm going to do match. So I want something in table team dash that matches this name, and I'm just going to lock in that column in case I copy this formula over. The name has to match, and now in my team dashboard, this column in my table. So I'm looking in the table, I'm trying to match the name on the other sheet to a name in here for my row number, comma 0. And I'm just going to close that off for now and click enter. And I have an error because it has no idea what column I'm looking in or where the information is that I'm looking for. It knows the row, it doesn't know the column. So to get the column, I'm going to do comma, notice now it's on column number, match. I'm going to do another match. And what value am I looking for? Well, I don't actually have it yet. For now, it's going to be right here. We're going to move that later. But let's just say I'm matching B42, comma. Now it's asking where do I want to find B42 or whatever is in B42. Well, I want to find it. I want to find it in my headers section of my team dash and comma 0 because I want it to be an exact match. And I'm just going to close that off and click enter. And I did something. Oh, here we go. I got 2 brackets here. Actually, the reason why I did that is because I don't know the syntax for headers. So I'll click enter. It's giving me an NA. Well, that's because nothing in B42 matches a header. But if let's look at our headers. What about overall score? That's one of our header names. Let's type that in here. I have an overall score. And now this is Peter Pan's overall score, 70.6. And let's look and see if that's right. We got 71. 70.6 if I give it a decimal there. So it's working okay, and I'm gonna do if error, just in case there's an error with anything going on here, comma, let's make it blank. Click enter. And I'm gonna drag this all the way down. It doesn't really matter how far, just drag it down far. And now I have scores for everybody. And maybe I just make this 1 decimal point for now. And this will have limitations, you'll see, because the number of decimal points you include, when you switch a metric, like that's not going to change. Same thing with percentages. So sometimes I segregate the charts and the selectors by the number of decimal points that are necessary and by whether or not it's a percentage, because I can't change the format. But anyways, now we have a dynamic thing here that if I were to change this to speed score, the data will change for each of these people to reflect their speed score in that table. And remember, this table is manipulated by a bunch of these things. So if I change the date of the table, the information changes, and that'll change the information that's in here. Now, there might be an occasion where someone doesn't test and they get a 0, and we have to accommodate for that. well, it's going to be blank, and we need it to say 0 just because of another formula that we're going to use later. So the way that I do this is, we've already written this. I'm going to do another if statement. So if, open parenthesis, if what we just did, all that stuff, equals blank, comma, 0. So if we do what we just did and it equals blank, or it comes up with a blank, let's make it 0, comma, but if not, I'm just going to copy what we've already done besides the equals blank, and I'm going to paste it here and just add another parenthesis and click enter. And nothing will change unless we pull a blank, but what we just said is, all right, so if we look for something and it's blank, give it a 0, and if not, just do the same thing. I mean, just give us what the value is. That's what we said to do. It's a long formula to not do much, and I'm just going to drag it down. So it applies to all these people, and there we have it. Now we could certainly create a chart from this, and it'll filter based on our information, but we don't want to do this, and I'll show you why. So let's just select all the data we have here. All right, this is all of our people. And I'm going to go to insert, and I'm going to insert a chart, just a bar chart with all the names and whatever the metric is, and it'll work, right? So I'll change this to, I don't know, I'll change it to overall score, and the data will change, and that's cool. But now in my table, what happens if I filter it? So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say I just want the chart to be for defensemen, and if I go back to my graph data, look what happens here. So what we need to do is we need to do a couple of things. We need to name a range, first of all, and we also need to create other equations that dynamically, the reason why it's doing this is because there are formulae in these cells. And if there weren't formulae in these cells, then we wouldn't get the data when we expand our filtering. So there's really a no-win here. We need to have a dynamic way that this updates, and there's really only one way that I know of how to do that in older versions of Excel, and we're going to go through that now. So to make this list of players dynamic, let me just add a header here. I'll call it player. And go equals the first player on our list, A44, colon, to index. Then we're just going to select out as many as we could possibly have, right? Like maybe it's 165. Well, that's not actually how many players, but that's how many rows. 44 to 165. So assuming that 100 players, over 100 players is the maximum what we'll have in our table. You might go down even further. It kind of depends. Comma, countif, and we'll just copy this. We want the same range, and we're going to go comma, quote, not equal to blank, and close that off and click enter, I think. And that should give us a dynamic list of people. So if we filter this list, it should filter this list too. And let's just do that. Let's unfilter that. Go to our graph data. And yeah, so both of our lists are the same. And before I move forward onto the next one, we're just going to do the same thing for the values. But before I do that, one thing that's important, this will come into play when we actually apply it to our charts, is we are going to want the name of our sheet, which is graph data. And I'm going to add that to each of these. So that right now it just says A44 to A165, but A44 to A165 could apply on any of these sheets. So we just need to be specific. Say graph data exclamation point. That's how you name your, you refer to your sheet name. And I'm just going to copy graph data exclamation point and apply it here and apply it here, and nothing will change. I'll click enter. It's just the same thing, but we're actually referencing this sheet also. Now I'm going to copy this formula and paste it here. And again, it's going to be exactly the same, except now, and this is important, this range here has to be the same range that's in the first one. So A44 to A165, this one has to be will be a different column. It'll be column B, but it has to be 44 to 165 because one of these will be used for axis labels and another one will be used for the actual values. And if you have a mismatch between them, your graph will look all messed up. So let's just change these A's to B's. So now we're looking for the values, but doing the same thing in kind of a dynamic way, if you will. So now we're moving on to the B's. Enter. Now here are the values. So that's one way that we can do it. In a different way that I find easier and actually more beneficial, less conducive to problems, is using offset. And this is what we've done in data validation before to get automatically updating lists. So we'll go equals offset, open parenthesis, this guy here, and we can lock that in, comma, countif, and now we can select a range of things, and it'll be our largest range. Let's say this is the most amount of people we'll ever have in a spreadsheet. So we'll count if, A44 to A177, locking that in, is quote, asterisk, question mark, quote, and we'll close that off. Now, what did I just do right there? I'm going to click enter. Too few arguments. I missed something here. I think I need a 0, 0, 0, 0. Let's try that. Okay, notice, so I just typed that in and nothing changed. We just have our list of people. And what did I do? I pretty much am taking a list here, and I'm counting the people that an asterisk is a wildcard. So anything that has something and then question mark is a text. And the reason why I do that is because if it doesn't have text in it, for example, these formulae, they'll count if you don't do that, and that'll screw up your graph. So I'm just going to try this. I'm going to try filter this to defenseman. Let's go to the graph data, and notice the graph does what we'd expect it to do, but our list shortens, and we can tell by the length of this that it's not counting blank values. So I'm going to go unsort this, and now we're going to do the same thing here. I actually shouldn't have showed you this formula because it's so problematic, and it's just overly complex. So I'm going to copy this, I'm going to paste it here. We have to do one thing different from values versus text fields, and that's because Excel knows what's a value and what's text. So this isn't going to work. If I click enter, and well, first let me change this to B, because we're looking now in column B to get the values over here. So B44 to B177. Excel's like, what in the world are you talking about? So the way that we do it with numbers is we just do a simple count. So there's no countif, we're just counting. That's made for numbers, and we'll close the parentheses and click enter. And what we should see is that the list of numbers is the same length as the list of people. It's just our list of numbers, not including all these formulae where there are blanks. So now these are kind of dynamically updating lists. And I like to have multiple graphs based on the type of metric. And right now we have one for, let's say this is 0 or 1 decimal point. Well, let's also get one for 2 or more, or 2 decimal points, which is like sprint times. Let's get another one for percentages, because when we switch a metric, so let's say if I were to switch overall score to sprint time, it would only display 1 decimal because that's the way that it's formatted here. My alternative is to display everything in this column, or anything I select with 2 decimals. But even that doesn't cover percentage difference between limbs and other things like that. So we're going to have 3 different chart interactions, one for each, I guess, type of metric. that we have so that it makes sense. And the only thing that I need to do here is I need to change this from B to C. Or, yeah, B to C and B to C. That's where we're matching to, and I'll click enter, and we'll get nothing. What if I type in a metric here, let's say strength score. Now this is Peter Pan's strength score. And then I'll do the same thing here. Instead of matching to B, we're going to match to D. And ultimately these will change. Ultimately what we match to will be something in our dashboard that we select with a drop-down. Right now we're just doing it kind of here for testing to make sure that everything works and we can see everything happening. So let's match everything to D, except for this. And this actually, because we're matching these to the player name, matching these to the headers in our table, and I'll click enter. And maybe I'll type in speed score just so we can see it happen. Let's drag these down as far as we would need to go for the maximum amount of people that would be in our database. And now what we have to do is we need to apply this information to these scores or to these values. So this is values 1. Let's say this is values 2. And this is values 3. And then you know what we might also want is, this is cool, but what if we had an average line too? And the way that we can do that, I'll type in AVG1, AVG2, and AVG3. And we will get an average based on our filtered data set. You won't be able to see it right now, but it will be based, you'll see it in a second, for whatever metric we select. Right now that's overall score, strength score, and speed score. So the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to go equals if the name, or if something in column A equals blank, then we want it blank, comma, but if not, then we want to get the average of all of our values. And I don't remember how far down I went. Ideally they should all be the same length, and they should just be as many as you would need. So let's get the average of all the values in there, and let's close that off. And I'll also wrap this around with an if error. So that's cool, but also if error, if there's an error with this formula in here, comma, let's make it also blank. So this is the average for overall score based on our data set in our table that we have right now. And I'm going to drag this down so it should be the same for everybody. And it is. I'm going to copy this and paste it here for average 2. And now instead of, oh, you know what I should have done? Let's lock in column A so that when I copy and paste this over, the name doesn't change, because we're always looking for whether or not that's blank. I'll copy that and I'll paste it over. But now instead of looking at B44 to B177, we want the average for values 2, whatever we select in there. So let's make this C. Let's make this C. That's where values 2 are. Click enter, copy and paste it, and I'll change C to D here for our average 3. So now this is the average of these, this is the average of these, and this is the average of these. And I'll grab all 3 of these and I'll drag them down. And now let's just take a look at this. So this is 67.3 for these people. And if I go to my dashboard now, and let's just filter, let's say we just want to look at the forwards. And I go back to my graph data. Now it's 69.9, and our chart still sucks. So 69.94, and if I unfilter it, go back to my graph data, now it's 67.33 again. So it's kind of an automatically updating average line that will be applied to our chart. Right now our chart is not, it is dynamic in a certain way, but it's not dynamic in the way that we want it to be. Now let's add in values 2, values 3, and the 3 averages here. So I'm just going to copy what I have up here, and I'm just going to paste that here, the values, just so I have headers. And now what I can do is this column here, I'm going to copy it, paste it, and I'm just going to change from looking at B to looking at C, and then looking at C to D, etc. as I go through. So I normally don't like doing it this way, where I just type in the letters, because it gets annoying. I'll show you another way as I go through the rest of them, and this is especially beneficial when you have a lot of stuff, and we did this in earlier videos if you've been following the series. Copy and paste this here, and I'll do a find replace. So instead of looking at C, I want to look at D. And what I can do is I can just select it and go find and select replace. And I've actually already done this on other things. C to D, replace all. And now we have the values in D. And I might just copy C and paste them, boom, boom, boom. And I'll do the same thing. So here I'll select C and I'll change it to E, and then I'll change it to F for the next one and G for the next one. So C to E and C to F and C to G. And notice now all the values are the same. It was just a little bit quicker than going in and typing all the numbers in or changing all the letters. So now we have dynamically updating. These are not dynamically updating, if you notice. Like we have formulae down here also, which is a problem for the charts. Here we don't have any formulae beneath. That's the important part. Now the next step in this process is creating named ranges. And the way that we do that is, you'll see I'm on formulas now, and there's something called a name manager. It's called something different in Mac. I don't remember what it's called, but essentially you're going to look for something that has stuff like this, where you can add a new list or add a new thing of names. And what I have here, so it knows my tables. I have a table data, I have a table profile, and I have a table team dash, which we named in our team dashboard area. And now I'm going to create another named range. And the reason why we have these formulae in here is not to see this stuff. I mean, that's cool and that's good for validity, and we need to do that during this process. But we actually made these formulae so that we could turn them into named ranges. In other words, the named range is the formula that we have. So I'm going to copy this one. I copied that formula. I go to Name Manager. I'm going to create a new one. And the purpose of this named range is it's going to be the axis titles for my charts, which are the names of the people. So I'm going to call this, let's say, chart axis. And I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to paste my formula. That's what it refers to. Click OK. And there's my formula right there for chart axis. And I'm going to click Close. And now for values 1, I'm going to do the same thing. However, I need to copy the formula. So I'm going to copy the formula for values 1, go to my name manager, do new, and I'll call this chart values 1. And again, I will paste my formula in here and click OK. And I just have to keep on closing it, but that's all we need right now for one dynamic graph. And I'll show you how it works. Maybe we do average 1 too. I'll do average 1 too. So I'll copy this formula, go to Name Manager, go to New, and I'll go chart AVG1. In the Name Manager, you can't do spaces, and I never remember all the rules, but you can't do a lot of special characters, so I just type it out very short and capitalize the letter of each word, and hopefully it's something I can remember, because that's what we'll need to do for our graph. And I'll paste in the formula, click OK, and click Close. So now if I go to my Name Manager, I have these 3 things that I created, these 3 formulae, named ranges that I created. And now in my chart, so let's just look at this again, because it's going to be pretty cool to see. So in this chart, I'll go to my team dashboard, and I will go just look at the goalies. And now I'm going to go back to my graph data, and this chart is ugly. Doesn't work well. My data filter is okay, but the chart doesn't work. So I'm going to go back here, unfilter that. Let's go to graph data. Now the chart looks great. That's how we designed it with that range. Now I'm going to go right click and select data, and I'm going to change this. I'm going to call it values 1 is fine. And the way that you do this is you need to call out the name of your sheet, which is graph data. And then after that, after the exclamation point, which signifies to Excel that it's a sheet name, then we go to, or then we enter in our name range. So I think that for the values, we called it chart values 1. And I'll click OK. Click OK. Or well, I can click OK, but I won't. I'll go to my range. And again, I'll remove everything after graph data with the exclamation point and type in the named range that I did for my labels, which is, I think I called it chart axis. And I'll click OK. And then I'll add a new series, and that's going to be my average. I'll call this just AVG and equals graph data exclamation point. That's the name of my sheet. And I think we called it chart AVG1 for our first type of graph, which uses at least 1 decimal. And I'll click OK. Not sure what happened here. Oh, I know what happened here, but that's okay. Let's change. I knew I shouldn't have done that. I didn't want to get into the graphing right now, but let's select this average, format the data series. I don't want to get too far into this. Oh, sorry, not format data series. Right click, change series chart type, and let's change this average to a line for now, and click OK. Doesn't really. We'll get into this in the next video. We're just going to go over the setup today. So now I have an average line and I have bars, and let me just make sure. Oops, not change series chart type. Right click, select data. All right, so it's still looking at the right thing, and Excel will do this. I don't know, it might depend on the version. It adds also the name of the file. And let me get out of there. So now the chart looks essentially the same as it did before. But now let's see what happens when we filter our data. So I'm going to go to Team Dashboard, and I'm going to pick on the forwards. And I'm going to go to my graph data. And now it updates and it looks okay. I can even pick, I'm going to go to my team dashboard, I'm going to unfilter that. And let's just pick 1, 2, 3 people that we want to look at. Go to my graph data, and there are our 3 people. So that's how you make a dynamically updating chart using old versions of Excel. Now you can use like I said, dynamic arrays like the filter function, unique function, to help get some of this stuff out, which makes it way easier. But this still works, and it's effective. So let me undo that. And yeah, so why don't I just I was gonna say something inappropriate. For giggles, I'm just going to copy this chart, and I'm going to paste it down here. And the reason why I want 3 charts is because I might want to display numbers, and I might want the axes to be specific. For example, having an axis from 0 to 80 might not make sense for an asymmetry percentage. And also, I don't want 2 decimal points in my axis for speed stuff. For non-speed stuff. So now all we have to do is do the exact same thing that we just did for these values. And I'm just going to copy for values 2. Copy my formula that I have in there. Name manager. New. I'll call this chart values 2. And I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker now because you know how to do it. Paste in my formula. Click OK. So I have chart values 1, chart values 2, and let's just get values 3 out of the way. Copy the formula, name manager, new chart values 3. Why am I spelling out these numbers? Because I don't remember if numbers are allowed in these names. And I paste in my formula, click OK. And now let's get the averages done. Copy this. name manager, new chart AVG2, and let's paste that in there. Click OK, close it, and let's copy average 3. Go to the name manager, new chart AVG3, and paste that in there and click OK. And now we have chart average 1, chart average 2, and chart average 3 in different orders. We have the axis that we'll need. We have chart value 1, 2, and 3. So now, all I have to do, let's go into this chart, select data, and the axis is fine. We don't need to change that. For values 1, let's just call it values 2. I don't know why. We're not even going to see it. But I'm going to change this again. So I'm going to go graph equals graph data, exclamation point, chart values 2. Click OK. And for the average, I'll change that. Again, let's go to the graph data, exclamation point, and chart AVG 2. Click OK. Click OK. So now we have two different values. It's hard to see right now, but if I put them side by side, and I also make a change. So now let's zoom in a little bit, and maybe let's make these, oops, that was a bad idea. Let's make it skinny. Let's make it skinny so that we can see them side by side. And notice even the axes are a little bit different automatically because the values are different. If I go to my team dash, let's just pick a couple people because I imagine they'll be somewhat different. Pick a couple people, go to my graph data, and now we can already see that the values are different, and we can quickly see if we add data labels here and add data labels here that Buffy does not have the same value in this graph that she has in this graph. And let's do this one more time. So let's copy this chart, let's paste it. So we have our 3 types of charts ready to go for the next video. And now let's go to select data, and I'm just going to change this to values 3 equals graph data, exclamation point, values, chart values 3. Click enter, and for the average, I'm going to do equals graph data, exclamation point, and I think it's chart AVG 3. Click OK. Click OK. And now we have 3 different graphs, and we can make this readily apparent by choosing a couple of different metrics. Why not? Like, so this stuff it's fine to have here, but we don't need it anymore. I don't even need to look at it. We just have to remember which chart is which. But let's look at some, just so that we can see what I mean by the different metrics. Let's pick a couple things. So here in our data table, we have ISO LP %diff. Let's copy that. And let's go to our graph data, and let's paste that in our values 2 field. Remember, this is the column header that we're looking for that governs our metric. So paste that in. And now notice, like, I guess we don't really need all 3. No, so imagine if we only had one graph. I'm going to paste this in again. And I'm going to format this as a percentage. I can format it here, or I can format it in the graph. It doesn't matter. But let's just say that I format it in the graph. Either way, it won't matter. I'm going to right-click, format data labels, go here, down here, and I'll make it a percentage. And let's just say we want 1 decimal point there. Not sure how well you can see that. I'm just going to make the numbers bigger so that you can see them. 14. And now if I wanted this to be overall score, like, remember, we're going to select from a drop-down menu here for whatever metric we want to look at in this graph 1. And let's say I want to look at overall score. Now we're looking at percentages that is nothing like the overall score. It's not what we're looking for. So that's why, let me just type in overall score again here, and I'll change it to a number again. So format data labels, go down here, and let's make it a number again, and fine, 1 decimal point is fine. Then let's make these format data labels as a percentage, 1 decimal point. So that's why we have these two different graphs, so that this one, graph number 2, can be based, we'll have a drop-down list that only contains things that are percentages, and then in our first one will only contain items that have 1 decimal or less, and then in the third one we'll only include things that have 2 decimals or more, like sprint times and stuff like that. So that's the purpose of having these 3 different types of graphs. In the next video, we'll take these graphs, we'll put them into our team dashboard at the bottom, and we'll create selectors for them so that we can pick what we want to see. So I hope this was helpful, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video.